Hello, everyone. This is Aaron. I'm back again with another tutorial. This is episode 14, How to Draw Eyes. So, I want to say I'm not too great at drawing eyes. I'll just be kind of honest about it. I don't really like drawing eyes. I don't know. They're not my favorite thing to draw. I draw them because I have to, but anyway. So let's go into the lesson. So my first note there says because we can draw. Oh, before we can draw the eye, we really need to know where it goes. So I drew there, as you can see, I drew the eye sockets first, and now I'm placing the eyeballs inside the sockets. That's really what our eyes look like. They're basically spheres, they're round balls. And the eyes sit inside the sockets of the skull. The eyes line up with the bridge of the nose. And right here, I'm drawing an example of what that looks like. I'm just going to draw a quick nose and then show you how the eyes line up with the bridge of the nose. So that's actually something I learned from David Finch, the comic book artist. He has a lesson on noses it's a lesson on noses, and in that video he actually talks about, drawing the nose. You can place the eyes correctly every time. Here I'm just writing. To practice eye placement, I like to just draw little lines for like little slits. I don't want to mess with drawing the entire eye and the lid and everything when I'm really just trying to get my placement right. It's like a waste of time. So I'm drawing little tiny lines just to get my placement as close as I can get it to accurate. It's a lot easier to just draw that than draw the whole eye and then have it not line up. Then you have to erase it and redraw it. So you might want to try that. Just draw little slits for eyes to get them in the right spot, and then you can draw the rest later. I'll show you that in a few minutes. My next note here says the eyes will always line up with the bridge of the nose. Doesn't matter what angle they're at. Doesn't matter what angle the head's at. The eyes are always going to be in line with the bridge of the nose. Sometimes you might get a little bit of variation, but if you place your eyes, even if you feel your face, like touch your face, touch where your bridge of your nose is, your eyes are directly lined up with that. So I've learned a lot just by like kind of feeling around on my own body, like, okay, where does this part go? Where is this part attached to? Or looking at my own, like, observing, and sounds weird, but I feel my own body to figure things out sometimes. And if you feel the bridge of your nose, your eyes are lined up directly with that. I don't know, but I have always had a hard time with placing the eyes correctly in the right spot. I've always had a hard time with that. So here what I'm drawing is I'm drawing what the eye parts are. So we have the first part, which is the sclera, the second part, which is the iris, and then the third part, which is the pupil. That's really all you need to know for drawing them. There's a lot more parts to the eye. If you look at anatomy books, there's a lot more to it. But for drawing purposes, this is really all you need to know. So I'm drawing in my guidelines there. It helps me place the iris, and sometimes I honestly forget my own rules of drawing. Like, I'll forget to do it, and then I'll struggle, and then I'll remember, oh, I could do this, and it would be way easier. I do that later, I think, and I forget to do some guidelines, and I end up struggling. So right here, what I'm drawing is I'm drawing just another example of the sockets, the eye sockets. If you look at a skull, this is similar to what the sockets would look like. And then your eyeballs just sit inside of it. And then the socket actually has other holes in it for, like, your nerves and everything to go through in the back. And here I'm just shading it a little bit. Number one, because I thought it looked cool, and number two, to show you that the socket basically doesn't catch all the light all the time. It's pretty dark in there, so obviously you're not going to see that when you're looking at a face, but this is what it would look like if it was a skull. So here I'm just shading it in a little bit just to make the point. You don't need to really draw what I just drew, but you really need to draw the eyes with the iris and the pupil. Get good at doing that. We're going to do more of that on the next page here. Okay, so I'm just saying the eye sockets are cavities that the eyes sit in, and they don't really catch a lot of light. They do sometimes, but not a lot. So here I'm just practicing lining up the eye lines again, just by drawing simple lines, just trying to get good spacing. So what I struggle with, I struggle with good spacing and alignment. Those are two different things. So aligning them right and then spacing them right is very difficult. At least for me it is anyway. So next what we're going to do here on this page is I'm going to show you how to draw an eyeball with some guidelines. And here I'm doing it really rather quickly, but I'm showing you what an eyeball would look like just with guidelines drawn, and then you can draw the eye a lot easier that way. Okay, so I'm saying drawing guidelines can help place the iris and the pupil. And this is actually something that I learned from Robert Marzullo. He's one of my favorite artists. I learned this from him. I had never seen it before. And it's almost like you take the sphere of the eye and do like a Loomis head method on it, where you're drawing guidelines, and you put the iris in the exact center of those guidelines, and then the pupil in the center of that, and your iris and your pupil will look accurate and look good. My second note: this is a lot easier than trying to guess at centering the iris. So it's a good point. Like, draw some guidelines, center guidelines, and that will place your iris correctly every time. You'll have a lot less trouble doing it. Because as soon as I started doing that, it became a lot easier. So I'm just drawing some different examples here of, moving the eyeball around and showing you what it looks like in different positions. My next note is basically saying this is good for practicing placing the iris and the pupil. I don't lay my eyes out like this, usually. Robert Marzullo actually does show you how to, wrap the skin around the sphere of the eyeball. I got to work on that a little bit more. But this isn't really how I lay out my eyes. I just do this for practice sometimes. So here I'm just, cleaning up a little bit, making it a little bit nicer. And if you're wondering, why don't I just use circle templates for the eyeballs? The reason is because, in my opinion, it's always good to be practicing your basics. So I draw circles freehand all the time, and it's a good thing to do. So I don't really use circle templates. Now, if I was doing like a finished piece, yeah, I would probably use a circle template. If I needed a perfectly round ball for an eyeball, I would do a circle template. It's just more accurate. So, but I like to practice them freehand, so that it trains my hands and my muscles to draw circles. So that's why I did all of these freehand. So here I'm just drawing another example of the socket on the straight on. Here I'm drawing it what it might look like if you're looking up at it. If you notice the shape of the brow change, the shape of the brow ridge, it's different. And if you remember from previous lesson, to make something look like it's like you're looking up at it, you have to curve it up, like the soup can method that Jim Lee uses. And then if you want to make something look like you're looking down on it, you have to curve it down. Here, so what I'm doing there is I just drew the eyeballs, trying to get them in the right spot. So I drew, it's called drawing through. I drew through the brow and then just erased what I didn't need. Another thing I didn't write down, the closer your brow is to the eyeball, the number one, it'll look angry, and it'll be like your head is tilted downward, or maybe you're frowning or something. The closer your eyebrow is to your eyeball, you're gonna look angry. Generally, when our faces are like in a resting state, our eyebrows are not that far down. But here's just another example of the downward view. So I did a looking up and then looking down twice, and then tried to do a straight on view. Or a 3/4 view. Sorry, that's a 3/4 view. Here I'm writing the brow position and shape changes depending on the view that you're going for. Oh, so when viewing from above or below. So depending on the angle of your view of your head or your face, your brow might be shaped completely differently. So you have to draw it a completely different way for it to look right. You can't just draw, a straight on view and think it's going to look right when you're trying to do an upshot. There's just a couple examples of trying to draw the brow looking down, looking up. Here we're doing it again. Just for practice, really. Here I actually start struggling with my eye placement, and the reason why is because I really didn't draw my guidelines like I just showed you how to do. So I made a mistake here, and I started struggling with it. So, yep, this happens. Honestly, I forgot how to. I forgot. I had just drawing the eyeball with the guidelines, and then I completely forgot about it and started just drawing on my own, and I completely forgot the rules of how to place the eye correctly, and sometimes you kind of suffer for either forgetting or not following your own rules, and I did right there. Because sometimes you get in a hurry, you know what I mean? Sometimes you're just like, man, I want to get this done, or I don't want this to take 3 hours. So you skip steps, and when you skip your steps, you can really start struggling. I think this is a good example of that. So now I'm gonna draw. Now on the next page, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start drawing some eyes, what they actually look like. The first couple pages were all introduction. We're gonna do a couple nice sketches here. So I'm just saying, now that we know where the eyes go, it'll be easier to draw them. You have to know where stuff goes to be able to draw it. I mean, that's something I've had to learn over the years. And I'm saying here, this is how I usually lay in my eyes. And I'm going to do a step-by-step here for you. So this one I'm just going a little bit slower, taking my time. And take your time with this. You don't have to rush. So number one, I drew the socket. Draw the eye socket. Number two, I basically drew my eye line for where the eye would be, and then I erased it. It just helped me place the eye, and now what I did, step 3, is I drew the rough shape of what the eye would look like with the skin over it. Basically, that's what I said. Let's draw some eyelids. So essentially, your eyelids are what are covering your eyes. So that's covering most of your eyeball. So when you're drawing the eye shape, like I'm drawing here, you're really drawing the eyelids. You're drawing the way they curve around the eye. So step 4, indicate your rough shapes of the eyelids. Step 5, step 5, I mentioned the tear duct. The tear duct turns in sharply. You got to pay attention to that. Just it'll look more real. Number 6 is sketching the eyebrow. Following the upper socket ridge. That's where the eyebrow goes, on the top of the on the socket, on the top bone of the socket is your orbital bone. Here I'm writing the iris is about 1/3 the width of the sclera. I also learned this from Robert Marzullo. I'd never heard that before. So your iris is about 1/3 the width. If you draw your iris is too small, and you don't know why, it's because they're not sized right. Or if you draw them too big and it looks weird, that would be why. So step 7, sketch the iris. Step 8, sketch the pupil using the guidelines. You can place it correctly that way. Here what I'm drawing is an example of how I draw pupils. um, this is how I draw the shape. To get the highlight, I don't even erase. I just draw like a crescent, kind of like this crescent shape, and then the white of the paper creates the highlight in the pupil. That's really all you need to do. I like drawing like a stylized approach. I don't really like drawing realism, so this is what I do for eyes, for pupils, to get the highlight in there every time. You just draw like this little crescent shape and then fill in the um, black uh, of the pupil, and then you leave a part of it white, and it gives it a highlight. So just making this one a little nicer. Remember to add your shadows. The eyelid, I'm going to write a note about that. The eyelid casts a shadow. It always casts a shadow onto the eye. So you're going to have a little bit of shadow underneath the eye, underneath the eyelid. So make sure you sketch in your shadows lightly, and then go from there. Yeah, so here I'm saying the eyelid always casts a shadow. It's very faint, but it's there. So I'm just taking my time with this one, trying to make it as nice as possible. And I'm not going for realism. That's not what I like to draw. So I'm just going for a stylized approach. So now what I'm doing is I'm just adding some of the detail inside the iris, and really all I do is basically just make some lines, and you got to make sure your lines for your detail in the iris, it follows the direction of the circles, so you can't just draw them all in one direction. It has to kind of fan out to look correct. So now what I'm doing here is I'm drawing a female version of an eye to show you the differences. So again, this is going to be a female eye, just showing you how they're different. They're almost identical. Really the only difference between male and female eyes is sometimes the shape and really the eyelashes. That's like the only difference. But they're pretty much the same. So here I'm following the same steps. I'm laying in my socket first. You see how much easier it is to get your eye in the right spot when you lay it in the socket? It's just when I figured that out a bunch of years ago, I was like, it's so much easier. Just draw the socket, and you'll be able to place your eye so much easier. And actually, David Finch teaches that also, but I found that out actually before David Finch started teaching on YouTube. So when I started drawing the socket first, it just became so much easier. So here I'm just drawing in the eyelashes, and I'm just showing you how. Oh, the other before I go on, if you want to make it look feminine, really, I'm just kind of thickening up those darker lines around the top and bottom of the eyelid, and kind of giving it like a little bit of a mascara look. And then the bottom eyelid, I didn't line it all the way around. I kind of left it a little bit undone. I just think it's a different look. Because if you look at women's mascara, it kind of trails off as it gets towards the front of the eye. So I'm just doing my best here to make a male and female version of an eye, just to show you the differences. There's not a lot of differences, but there are some. Okay, so yeah, I'm just saying the only difference is the eyelashes and, I also say here sometimes men's eyes can be drawn more angular. It gives it, like if you notice the male eye that I drew on the left, it's got more angles, and the female eye has more sweeping curves. I always find curves harder to draw. It's tough. So here I'm just adding some shadow underneath the eyelid. I'm not going to get too crazy with these, but just showing you some examples. So here what I'm doing is I'm going to draw like half of a face to show you this isn't like a perfect face, but this is what I do when I'm deciding I want to draw a face. This is how I lay it in. I'm just doing this to show you how I get the eyes in place. I draw the nose first. I always draw the nose first. You don't have to do that, but that's what I do, because when I realize that the eyes line up with the bridge of the nose, wherever your nose is, that's where your eyes are going to be, on the right lined up with the bridge. So that's why I draw the nose first. Just helps place the eyes better. So here what I'm doing is I'm drawing, I tend to do this a lot too, is I'll draw one side and then I'll draw the other side. Don't draw the entire eye and then draw the other entire eye. You can really struggle when you do that. I like to draw one side, one line, and then I'll draw the other line on the other side. It's a lot easier to get your symmetry right when you do that, I think. So again, like I said, this is just an example of how I actually lay in the eyes. I don't draw the entire eyeball when I'm doing it. I'm saying I draw the nose first. And again, you don't have to do it this way. This is just the way I do it. Just works for me. Yeah, so yeah, I draw the nose first since it helps me place the eyes. And there I'm drawing a tiny little example of that. So there I'm putting the eyeballs in, or the irises rather. And then really when I'm drawing eyes from this kind of a distance, I don't draw all the detail. I just leave it out because it's harder to see anyway. So I just, I don't draw all the detail when it's farther away. That's something I didn't write down, but I wanted to mention it. The closer you are, obviously, the more detail you're going to draw. And then the farther away the eyes are, the less detail you need to put in. Because you won't be able to see it anyway. So don't draw all that detail if the face is farther away. Like that face I drew there is kind of like a medium shot, which is typically the distance that I like to draw my faces at is like a medium shot. And so you really aren't going to see all the super high def details of the eyeball or the eye. So you don't really need to draw them. But if I was doing a real close-up, like even closer than what I did in that last page, I would draw more detail. But, for like your comic drawings or your practice drawings, a drawing like that's really all you need just to either practice or get, a character laid in. Oh, here I'm saying sometimes I use a compass to measure for perfect placement. The eyes are supposed to be 3 eyes wide, right? And I struggle sometimes to place them correctly. And so I'll use my compass and measure and then draw the second eye based on where my measurement is. And then I'll measure it and make sure that they look right. But that's a trick that I started doing when I realized I was really struggling to get my spacing correct. I started using the compass and it really helped. I don't do that all the time now, but sometimes I do if I don't have any guidelines or I'm really struggling with, or if I'm just struggling, I'll use the compass and it helps. Yes, I'm just saying there, eye placement is key, and then when you know how to place the eyes, then you can start having fun and drawing other stuff. So here I'm just drawing some different styles of eyes to show you that, you don't have to draw realism. You can make your eyes or your character look however you want. And if you get it placed correctly and you know how to draw it, you can kind of stylize it and make it fun. So I'm just, messing around here, just giving you an example. But you can make the eyes any shape you want them. The key is just to make sure that you have your placement and your alignment correct so that it looks good. So that's going to do it for episode 14, How to Draw Eyes. I really hope you liked this episode. I had fun filming it. I hope you got something out of it, and hope you subscribe and like and share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one.